Wist jij dat wij leven in de 6e extinctie? Een extinctiegolf is een periode waarin meer dan 75% van alle dieren- en plantensoorten uitsterven. En de oorzaak? Dat zijn wij, dat is de mens.
Hey, droeftoeter.
Ja, wat?
Gaan we nou weer een depressieve film maken waarmee we mensen een kutgevoel geven?
Nee, daar zijn er al genoeg van.
Nou, wat gaan we dan doen?
We gaan het hebben over iets waar ik mij als bioloog al 10 jaar lang druk over maak.
Het is die godvergeten mooi. Dus onthoud eens één waarheid die we nu leren in deze film.
Ja.
Auw! Wat een ellende, jongens.
De belangrijkste reden voor die 6e extinctie, dat is ons voedselsysteem. En dan vooral landgebruik. Land waarop je teelt, dat is geen natuur meer.
The totality of all the places in which we live is 1% of the planet's surface. Agricultural area is 40% of the planet's surface.
Wat we hier hebben is in feite gewoon een enorme milieuproblematiek.
Why is nobody talking about land use then?
It's just amazing. It just blows my mind.
Maar er is wel een hele grote beweging die zegt we moeten biologisch gaan. En dat is toch goed?
Bij biologische landbouw heb je veel meer land nodig om hetzelfde hoeveelheid voedsel te produceren.
Hoezo?
Omdat de opbrengsten lager zijn.
The more land you require to produce your food, the closer you push us towards systemic environmental collapse.
The only way to get systemic change is to have a strong government that doesn't back down.
Veel politici durven niet hun nek uit te steken als ze niet het gevoel hebben dat er echt een publieke steun voor is.
Nee.
Dit eerste plaatje zegt eigenlijk al alles. We hebben het van kinds af aan gewoon geleerd dat dit het verhaal is. Ja. Wij willen een boerderij zoals in een kindertekening.
Heb je hoop?
Mensen kunnen veranderen. Het systeem kan veranderen.
Our challenge is to produce more food with less farming.
And welcome to yet another insightful questions and answers session for the New Vision for Earth Film Festival. Today we have the pleasure to have with us, unfortunately, only one part of the duo that made the incredible film Paved Paradise. We have Hidde with us here, who is the film writer, and I'm sure he's going to do his best to also represent his partner in crime, Karsten, the film director, who didn't manage to be here. So, Hidde, thank you so much for joining. Just before
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Just before starting, I just want to say to all of you that haven't yet watched Paved Paradise, or maybe you want to rewatch it, that it is available until tomorrow on the film festival platform. We are going to share a link in the chat, I believe, for that. And it will also be available in the upcoming GLF Nairobi, A New Vision for Earth on the 11th and 12th of October. So in about a month from now. So get your chance to watch it today, tomorrow, or again in October, or find it in other streaming platforms. So yeah, a link will be shared in the chat. And without further ado, I'd like to go to my guest, Hidde. So Hidde, I see you're joining from a very sunny place, which is wonderful. How are you feeling? Are you ready to answer some exciting questions?
I'm really curious about the questions. Like I've done a lot of question and answer, and like to say the least, they're often very lively because it's quite the topic is quite controversial, at least like not a topic, but the solution I'm bringing is often new to people. It goes against like the common idea of what sustainable agriculture is. So often they're very lively, and I hope today it's the same.
Okay, let's do if I'll pass the test of lively questions. But I think we'll start like with a very simple one, which is learning about what brought you in the story, what made you decide this is the story I'll make a film about, and of course, how did you selected some of the experts we saw on the film. For example, we saw everyone's, let's say, favorite controversial in some ways journalist George Monbiot in there, and several other people. So yeah, what brought you to the story, and how did you pick the people that said your story?
Yeah, the thing is, like I studied biology, so I really love biodiversity. Like when I'm going on holiday, I go to the Amazon or to Congo Basin or something. I really love trekking to the jungle. So biodiversity is really my thing. And like when I studied, I already learned that like, the last 100 years we lost 85% of our mammals. So I'm really worried about like it's almost 12 o'clock, as we say in the Netherlands. Like we don't have any more time to save biodiversity. And for me, like what is like often frustrating in the debate about sustainable agriculture is that one particular parameter, which is land use, is not taken into account. And like I already learned during my study that land use is the most, like habitat fragmentation and habitat destruction is the key to biodiversity loss. So I think I like already for 20 years, I slowly get like more and more frustrated that we talk about everything, but not about land use. And I remember then going to Karsten, he said like, I want to make a film about land use. And he said, well, that's not going to happen. Like that's the most stupid and boring thing ever. And I keep pushing, and then he thought of like I think in like a very elegant and humorous way of telling the story. So for me, it's like my father also, like he was like also a forester. So I grew up loving biodiversity, often going out, like watching birds. And so I really like, this is my thing. How did I like select the experts? Like I studied this subject already for 10 years. So I wrote a lot about it also in newspapers. I wrote some books on it. So I especially, for instance, I know the work by Andrew Balmford. He works at Cambridge, and for me he's like one of my heroes, and he's like trying to push against the narrative. Like the current narrative is of course that we should go organic and try to make our fields more hospitable for plants and animals, and he's really trying to push back, like it's all about land use. So for me, like Andrew Balmford was my first choice, but George Monbiot, why I picked him, because I really love he like a couple of years ago, he planned to write a book about the future of food, and he previously he really liked organic, he really liked agroforestry, and then he said he said to me, I read 5,000 papers, and I changed my mind. I changed my mind that it's not about organic. We should go conventional. We should intensify more. And I really think it's special that people at like the age like 30 plus, 40 plus still are able to adjust their stance. So for me, this is like, if you really look at the evidence, we should go for land sparing. And I really love people who are like engaging with the facts and the evidence and like changing their minds. And it's like he lost friends because of this stance. Like there are people now, like he lives in Oxford, and people really cross the street when they meet him now because they think he's now a traitor. And like these people, of course, that this is like an interesting conflict for a film, of course.
Okay, cross the street so you don't speak to someone. That's an interesting approach to a conversation. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing also how you found your way through that. Interesting that you, of course, started biology and then you found yourself into food systems. I'd love to ask based on what you said, because you said you love, data and you love people studying the science, etc. And as you may know, of course, science is very rarely black and white.
Yeah, that's true.
No matter, like there is ways to suggest to support your position by collecting data that support the position, etc. And you will never find a scientist that will say, I'm 100% sure about that.
True.
They will always leave a space for doubt. So, for example, in the organization I work for, C4ICRAF, you'll find a lot of scientists that consider sustainable intensification a land sparing technique, and they would also argue and potentially bring you data that shows the land sparing, despite the fact that it could reduce pollution because of the fertilizers, because of the less use of fertilizers, etc. It's a way of fragmenting the landscape. It's not friendly for biodiversity. it leads to loss of agrobiodiversity, for example. What would you say to this scientist? I'm asking you that mostly because while watching the film, I didn't feel, as I also shared with you, I didn't feel that you are seeing this as the only answer, but you want to ensure that this is also part of the discussion.
Exactly. So like two things. I think like the world is a big place, so I think we need multiple solutions. So there's like, I think like in many places, for instance in Costa Rica, I think land sparing is the way to go because the biodiversity in those tropical forests is so high you can never mimic that on a field. Europe is already like a little bit different. For instance, in Holland we have like a lot of birds like the godwits, which like they prefer meadows over a forest and over a swamp. So like there's always a nuanced story to it. So I definitely wouldn't say that land sparing is the only way to go. There are also quite some crops, for instance, coffee, which work perfectly with sharing. So I think like for a lot of staple crops, I think land sparing is the way to go. But you should always like look at it case by case. And one reason why I made quite a like one-sided film, I think like the current narrative of land sharing and organic is really like it's in everybody's mind. So I wanted to push back a little bit. So people sometimes say to me, why don't you like made a film a little bit in the middle? But I think like there are like if you look on Netflix, there are tens of films which are on the side of the sharing. So it's like Kiss the Ground and My Biggest Little Farm. So it's like there are 10 films on one side. So if I make a film in the middle, it doesn't help. So I wanted to make like a film on the other side so that people watch all those movies and can make their own conclusion. And just, I hope that they realize that I think there's a lot of merits for organic agriculture. It has a lot of advantages, but it also has disadvantages. And I think we often don't talk about that. And that's what I wanted to change. So it's not that I think like we should stop going organic, but please keep in mind, it's not only positive, there are also some downsides with organic.
I find this very interesting, and I really appreciate the reasoning behind, taking a side in this discussion. Yeah. So thank you for sharing this rationale. Another thing I think I'd love to ask myself in this, and just to also bring some social scientists in the game. Because we've covered now like the natural scientists and they fight what's the best way to produce food. What about your ideas, for example, or like how do you see the land sparing and sustainable intensification, let's say, interacting with the whole idea around food sovereignty or the labor rights or the people basically that produce our food, and what about the extensive again set of data that showcases we don't need more food, we just need to distribute food in a different way. It's not about more yields, but it's about food justice basically.
Those are very interesting questions. I think the question about food sovereignty and the rights of people and like who makes our food, I think this is also like it's almost an ideological debate. So do you find like, for me, like I also like land sparing because I really like modernized agriculture where few farmers make a lot of food, and that frees up hand for people to go to the city and like do other economic activities. This is an ideological idea because I love the modern world. I think the modern world is the way forward. And a lot of people who are into food sovereignty, they actually think we should live more in harmony with nature. We should like make our own food. We should not live in cities, but on the countryside. So I understand this position, but for me, like land sparing also fits in the whole story of modernizing agriculture. So I really, for instance, if I look at the future of sub-Saharan Africa, I think people should move away from the countryside. So we shouldn't like do very labor-intensive agriculture because it's a toil. People should move to the city, but this is definitely an ideological choice. So often, if you are in this discussion, people say you don't care about food security or you don't care about food sovereignty. Then I always say let's stop discussing about facts. This is like a value-based discussion.
Okay.
And the second question. Okay. And the second question was, what was the second question again?
Oh well, it was still on the idea of food justice, the fact that we don't need to
Oh yeah,
produce more food,
yeah,
so more yields, but the fact that we probably don't distribute food in the best way
true.
possible.
Yeah. So I think like the discussion about land sharing and land sparing is irrelevant. Like it's like the amount of food is irrelevant. So I agree that I think that like with 10 or 11 billion people, we still definitely need more food. And there are some places in the world like sub-Saharan Africa and then also India where we definitely need to increase yields because we don't want Europe to feed and America to feed the whole world, of course. But I often hear this case like, why do you want to intensify because we don't need any more food? But you can also intensify when you need less food and then you have more space to give away back to nature. So it's like the whole discussion about do we need more food or not is it doesn't matter to the discussion about land sharing, land sparing. So it's uh, like for instance in Europe, I know that at the moment we know a little bit how much people we will end up with. Like we have like almost 1 billion people. That it won't increase that much. And there are studies who show that we can actually grow and as many food as we do have now on 25% of the current acreage. So and that for me is like you can like rewild 75% of Europe. For me, this is fantastic, and it doesn't then matter if how much food we produce. Of course, like we should definitely reduce our waste. We should reduce our meat consumption, and then again we look at okay, this is the amount of food we have to produce. What way is the best? Should we go for land sharing or should we go for land sparing? And often I have the idea that land sparing works better.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I truly appreciate, your very honest takes on this. And I think it's quite interesting to have this conversation also from a very personal perspective. I do have one last question that I would say it's more on the philosophical, some would argue with quite a lot of science-based and knowledge-based background as well. Because then I want to move on and learning a little bit more about, the film itself.
Yeah. Cool.
But I think the audience definitely finds your takes on this super interesting because it's nice to know what the creative mind behind a film thinks about those things. There have been many, many reports in the recent years that show, for example, that a lot of what European settlers considered wilderness when they colonized the Americas are not, the idea of wilderness is a Western culture.
This is a very
not,
it is.
And when colonizers landed there, what they saw is not necessarily something that was living on its own, and then some people were living on the corner, but it was a well-managed landscape from different knowledge-based practices. How do you feel about this? What is your take on this matter? As a lot of people could argue that land sparing is a very nature here, people here narrative.
Yeah, that's true. And like, you're absolutely right. Like, there's always like, especially in the States, there's almost like a racist undertone in the wilderness. Like the West, the colonizers, they just wiped out all the people there. So what I think is like, I know that indigenous people are very good stewards of their land often. So for instance, if you go to the Amazon where a lot of like tribes are still living, I would definitely like, for me, land sparing is a separation between like cities and the modern life and nature. But if we like also the same accounts in Costa Rica, like a lot of protected forests where you can't deforest anymore, they are still inhabited by indigenous people. And this is really important. Like you can't live with 11 billion people like indigenous people.
I think Hidde is frozen for me. I'm not sure if it's also for the audience. So while we wait for Hidde to come back,
am I here? Yeah.
Yes, you're here.
Cool.
I think that we left you we cannot expect the whole world, but then you were frozen for us. So
you cannot you cannot like expect the whole world to live like indigenous people because there's not enough space. But the indigenous people we still have, they're often very good stewards of the land. So if I talk about like rewilding or setting aside land for nature, this has to include indigenous people. So for me, it's like what I say, land sparing is a separation between the modern world and and nature. And still, again, I often hear this question, like this argument, and it's a good argument, but I still think plants and animals need wild ecosystems. And for me, like the Amazon, for instance, I know it is often you have all this terra preta and stuff. So I know that it's people live in it, but it's a whole different world than modern agriculture, like feeding 11 billion people. It's impossible for me to do that in harmony with nature. So again, we really have to talk to those indigenous people, and I know there have been some problems with land sparing, especially in Africa, that people are like evicted from their land. So it is a very good question, but the question for me is also the same if you go organic. We still, like, our modern world needs so much food. Also, organic like doesn't live in harmony with indigenous people, I think.
Thank you. No, I mean, the question is mostly, to understand if, the feeling that someone might get of the separation, how you felt
True.
about it. And I think you have a very
like
specific
I also
sense of it.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah I also like to add, like, separating nature from cities doesn't mean that we can't go to those nature. Like, for me, it's like I don't want us to need nature for things. I don't want us to need nature for food or shelter or energy, because once we need nature for our survival, we will abuse it. So for me, it's like if you separate the modern world from nature, we can actually enjoy nature. So I really like, for me, like if I look into the future for Europe, I think we have like 75% we will rewild, and we will go there. We will enjoy nature instead of needing it for shelter or for energy or for food, because this always brings in conflict. And I just want to enjoy nature.
Thank you for sharing. I hope everyone can enjoy nature indeed. And I think to close this question, I think it's also quite important to learn from, the practices, other food system practices beyond the, modern, as you call it, agriculture.
True.
So going back to the film itself, although you've already kind of answered this when you said that for you, this is a commitment, let's say, to shake the conversation and explore and allow people to explore their own truth, let's say, in between the different ideas that are supported by different knowledge systems and science. I would love to hear from you what you hope the impact of this film would be.
So the thing is, this is already my thing for like years. We have been, like, between brackets, indoctrinated, I think, already since the 70s, that the future of food or the future of the planet lies in living more in harmony with nature and doing a step back and retrench. And for me, like I'm only like I'm alone. I have some friends who think the same, but for me, it's fascinating that, like, if you look at politics, you have social democracy, you have neoliberalism, you have fascism, you have like all, like, a plethora of ways to think about the future. And if you think about sustainability, there was for a long time only one narrative. There was only one idea of how we should, like, build a sustainable future. And for me, this is impossible. It's never good. It's never a good idea if there's only one way to the future. So I think, like, if you have multiple ways, you just discuss with each other, and ideas having sex, and then it brings to better ideas. So for me, it's like, I want the world to know that there are more ways to a sustainable world. And I think there are definitely merits in the traditional green story, but mind you, there are also different ways. So for me, it's like different places on the planet can choose different paths to a sustainable future. And I really think for me, it's really important that I do believe that the traditional greens, which I often feel that I am against, I'm not against them. I think they have their merits. I think I have my merits, and let's all build different ways to a beautiful future.
I think this is probably something you and I agree 100% on, in the sense of, like, I truly don't believe there is one single vision for a better future. I think the self-determination and plurality of visions is a very important thing.
Yep.
And we should have more conversations exactly on that
Yeah, exactly.
matter.
Yeah. And this is like what
Um,
humans can do really good. Like humans are really good to exchange ideas and build on that, make new ideas. And this is the way for me to make sure that in 2100 we have a beautiful planet.
that's wonderful. It's wonderful to try and think as far away, and also it's important to also find some hope that we will indeed have a
Yeah.
planet by 2100. And I think that this leads me to my next question, which we are talking a lot about land, and we are talking a lot about food. But indeed, the idea, a lot of the dominant environmentalism is mostly talking about fossil fuels, which, to be honest, it's probably extremely important, because unless
It is.
fossil fuels are stopped, I don't think we'll have any land to talk about. So I'd love to know how you think the whole discussion on land from the perspective of food systems can be part of this environmental narrative, how more people can become more aware about land issues, and not only food related land issues, but also general land issues, including, as you said before, the dispossession of people from land, etc. How can this discussion be part of
this is also a very good question. Like, one reason why I also made the movie is that I think like the biodiversity crisis is still like underreported. Like, we know, but like if you compare it to climate change, it's like there and there. So for me, this is also like it is a very important topic for me too. I did have an answer on what was the other question again? Sorry.
So how can this...
Yeah, I know. What really surprised me during my research is that if you look at where the CO2 from, in like the extra CO2 in the air comes from, people often know it's from fossil fuels, but like they know it's from oil, it's from gas, it's from coal. But the thing is, if you look at the top 4 reasons, like the top 4 sources of the CO2, like first is coal, third is gas, and the third is oil, and then the fourth is gas. But second is land use change. So by cutting down forest and making farms out of them, we release a lot of CO2 in the air. Same if we like drain swamps. So people often don't realize how important land use is in climate change. It's like really a major source of climate change is actually our land use. So this is also why I'm really like in favor of land sparing. I know that you can sequester carbon in the soil. There are ways of doing that when you farm, but it's similar to biodiversity. Nature can do it so much better. So for me, it's also like one reason that I talk a lot about biodiversity because I'm a biologist, but from a climate change perspective, if you can rewild 70% of Europe, bring the trees back, bring the swamps back, you will suck a lot of CO2 out of the air. So for me also, land use is again an underreported issue in climate change, and we need to build more nature because it is a part of the solution for climate change.
Okay, thank you for sharing. That's great, and I think I agree with you in the sense of like the biodiversity crisis is very often overlooked in the discussions, and very often nature is being seen merely as a solution to the climate crisis instead of being appreciated also for the cultural and all
I know,
other elements.
true.
Is,
like for me, it's like it's an intrinsic question. Why do people often ask me why do we want to save biodiversity? And it's really hard to find an answer to that. For me, it's like I can't even like begin to discuss. I feel intrinsic that we have like a responsibility of those animals, but we can like if like 50% of the biodiversity leaves, we can do without it, I think, but I don't want to. And this makes also the biodiversity crisis less urgent for a lot of people.
Well, I think we assume a lot when we say that if a big part of the biodiversity
goes, maybe
will be able to survive, because I think we are part of the biodiversity. Like we are animals in the end. So and we are pushing according to also the planetary boundaries discussion that has been going on. We've been pushed 6 out of 9 already. So
I know.
I don't necessarily think that I think that the narrative, to be honest, I think that the narrative of humans being either superior or completely separate from nature have contributed also to the idea that we can
I know,
survive
yeah.
without nature, right? And I
Yeah,
don't think we can.
yeah. Like the thing is, this is again, it touches the subject of living in harmony with nature, of separating yourself from nature. I think we never lived in harmony with nature. Just last week there was a study again, like the extinction of the megafauna in between the ice ages. So the megafauna in Northern America, all the big animals there, it was because we somehow, like it is related to us coming there. So it's now really like there's a lot of evidence now that everywhere we come, we kill off all the big predators and the big herbivores. So I think like even in history, we never lived in harmony with nature. I think at the moment we are the gods of this planet, and I think it's better to be good at it. That's Stuart Brand.
Okay, this is a lot for me to take, as I think this is a very black and white argument in the sense of like I cannot through discussions with other people, I've heard stories of, you know, histories of living in harmony with nature. So but
it's always also a little bit hard for me, in which is not my native language, to exactly have the nuanced story. It's harder. It's like in Dutch.
It's also not my native language, so don't worry. And most of the people listening to us is probably also not my native language. But I think we've been having such an interesting discussion that we've already passed our 30 minutes. So I'd love to basically close it off with a question from you, for you. If you're planning to make more films, in the future to you know, continue talking about this side of the story and continue talking about what you want to talk about, and I'd love for you to leave us with the question for the audience, something you'd like the audience to take home with them from our conversation together.
Oh yeah, for me it's like what I really like to let people think about, what do you think is needed to reduce our land use? Because there are many ideas of how to, like you were talking about, our next film is about precision fermentation probably, which is a alternative protein source. And for me it's like, this is like, we all know that of all the agricultural area there is, 70% is in use for feed and for the animals. So it's the biggest lever is meat. So I think like, but I'm looking at also like more creative. Does anybody have like a creative idea on how to reduce land use?
Okay, I mean, knowing our audience usually, I'm sure there are so many creative ideas. I am also sure we have people with their minds working right now, with their minds like saying, oh, I'm gonna rewatch the film, or I'm gonna watch the film, or I disagree with this guy, or I agree with this guy. I'm sure we stirred the pot a little bit here, and that's interesting.
Yeah, and I really hope like if people watch the movie, they can just message me. I really like it, either via phone or mail. I love to engage. Yeah, I love to engage with people.
Wonderful. I mean, so you heard it, everyone. You can call Hidde and share all of your issues or thoughts with him. Hidde, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's quite interesting to learn from your thoughts, and to hear what you have to say, and to see the film. I just want to remind to everyone that the film Paved Paradise is still on the film, A New Vision for Earth Film Festival that we are running until tomorrow. And then you'll be able to watch it again on the 11th and 12th of October for GLF Nairobi, A New Vision for Earth, where we are also going to discuss a lot about food. So this is a very good prep, watching this film, to let's say an appetizer for all the discussions that are also going to happen in GLF Nairobi. And we hope that you'll have nice conversations based on this film, because in my understanding, Hidde, please correct me if I'm wrong, one of your main ideas is that this will actually make people think, and this will make people search more about where our food is coming from, and our own relationship with nature. Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed our chat, and I hope your other half of this film feels better soon, and feels represented in this conversation too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Thank you. Cool. Bye, everyone.